Everyone should have in front of you the biographies of each panelist. So in the interest of time, please simply let me signal that Professor Stephanie Golob, which is Associate Professor of Political Science here at Peru College, who has academic experience in international commerce in the region. And our friend Omar Ramirez Tejada, colleague, is a Minister of Environment and has studied urban planning and environmental law, and has been the Minister of the Environment and Advisor to the Presidency of the Dominican Republic, and as the Minister said, has been the advisor to the President. And also our colleague and friend, Professor Washington Gonzalez. He is a professor of law and rights in the Autonomous University of the Dominican Republic, and has been also working in a lot of labor-led affairs and migration affairs. So we want to ask our panelists to start with a little discussion in your topic of interest. And I want to start with our colleague Omar Ramirez Tejada, we ask you to talk to us a little bit about the processes and the challenges of integration in terms of the environmental challenges, which is one of the biggest areas that affects the region. And as you know, when there's a cyclone or a natural disaster, not only does it doesn't just affect one territory, but it sort of it takes over the entire zone. So in terms of preparedness and prevention, and also in terms of remediation, we should have a good discussion around the topic of the environment, which should be fundamental. And I also want to ask colleague Washington Rosales to talk to us a little about the topic of the work and security, and then asking Professor Golob to give us some initial commentary in terms of commerce, and then some questions to follow up, and then an opportunity for our colleagues in the public to make any questions they desire. So with any further ado, please, Omar Rivera. Good evening to everyone. It's an honor to be here in New York, especially in this prestigious academy. I really want to thank all of the Dominican authorities that are here, and also Senator Rahel and everyone, all the students who are here present in act of solidarity with the Dominican Republic. So the first thing that I want to say is that the environmental topic is a topic that is imperative in the 21st century, and is very much a topic that also has attracted great expectations in this era of knowledge. It's not a secret to anyone that the environment it's a bull, and it's a questioning element where all 195 states need to be concerned because the environment is in danger. And there is a million of national, international treaties and convenings that after the Second World War, to be specific, has been signed. More than 48 treaties and international convenings within the mark of the United Nations here in New York. But I was telling Ambassador Cotorreal that I had the pleasure of being with him when the Dominican Republic on the April 22nd of 2016 signed precisely the Paris Treaty. That we never, that from Second World War up to now, no judicial instrument at an international level had been signed with so much seriousness that 178 parts did it in less than a month. And that says clearly that there is a will for the international community to protect the environment and and for this phenomenon of this 21st century, which is climate change. And climate change has already taken lives in our region. Just to give you some specific data, the World Bank published recently that in their work about the Caribbean, that in the last 10 years, 1.3 million Caribbean people have died, but not it seems that 4.4 millions have been affected by climate displacement. About displacement, this is our expert right here in immigration. But it is important that you know that a lot of the fundamental causes in the Caribbean around displacement are not just economic displacement issues, but also from an environmental lens. And another important aspect that we need to highlight is that Caribbeans and Latin Americans we consider in this hemisphere that the atmosphere, the water, and all of the elements are a public good. It is a public good that everyone here has a right to use, to enjoy, and to make of it a sustainable use over time. That's why since we consider it a right, we need to defend an effective protection of our natural resources in our region. That's why there has never been really resistance in natural material in terms of nature. That's why I'm saying that, I want to talk about how Dominican Republic has played a role in this framework of integration. Latin American, strong Caribbean country, and American. In our hemisphere of 35 countries, basically, the Dominican Republic has led, as Minister Mejia said, of integration and also the regional integration, Caribbean and Latin American as well. One of the elements that caused this integration was globalization, and globalization pushed our countries that we needed to have commonality and positions around these topics like atmosphere, the use of water, the use of natural resources, etc. For Latin America and the Caribbean, it is obliged to develop coordinated responses within the states and within the actors that are within the states, which is a very important aspect of integration. Integration doesn't only happen between the states, but it helps and supports that within the states there are common positions in the different political actors. And that is something that for Dominican Republic has been a learned lesson, that integration has helped to question our states, but also has helped us question the political class of those states that has the responsibility to direct the destinies of those countries. I don't want to extend too much. I'm going to finish with a very important topic and aspect of this conversation, and that I would like you to visualize very well. In what sense? Our hemisphere, including the 35 states where North America, and in this case the United States of America and Canada, play a leading role that is very important, is that our hemisphere reserves 33% of water production in the planet. This is the hemisphere that has the widest forest land. It also has the most important resources in the country today, in the planet today. How do we administer them? How do we use them in an intelligent way is a challenge, it's a hemispheric challenge. And it's a challenge that needs to be clear in terms of the understanding of the leadership of our countries. And in terms of the Treaty of Paris, even though the Trump administration announced their retreat from them, they haven't done it. And we expect, and we're precisely expecting, the feeling that there will be reflection about the Paris Treaty, and that we're going to continue moving forward with this process, the slow but sustainable process that the cooling effects gas emissions, which reached more than 52 gigatons of our hemisphere. Our hemisphere has barely, in this case, with the United States and Canada, has gone to 22%. If we take out the United States and Canada, Latin America, and the Caribbean only have a carbon footprint of 9%. So Latin America and the Caribbean is essentially a clean region in terms of gas emissions. But there's a very important case here to see. Out of the top 10 most vulnerable regions in the country, in the planet, 5 are in a region, and within those 5 is the Republic of Haiti and Dominican Republic. That's why, in terms of climate change, it is urgent that there be a global response so that this does not continue to affect precisely the most vulnerable countries, like Latin American and Caribbean countries. I want to leave it here so that we can continue later. Thank you. Gonzalez, if you can talk to us a little bit of how we work integrational topics in terms of work and immigration, that we know it's a topic that is affecting the region in its totality. Can you please talk to us about your experience in the context of the Dominican Republic? Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. For me, in this stage, to talk about immigration and integration fills me with two big questions. The first one is, when you talk about integration and immigration, you necessarily, according to the big theorists and the international organizations around migration, we need to talk about regular migration. And secondly, that around my country, we also have to talk about integration and immigration. Sometimes seems to be confusing with the part that's about fusion. So it's two big challenges in the world where irregular immigration continues to rise, and we put this in a stage that has to be a challenge. So I wouldn't want to scientifically talk about the topic, but I want to present what has been our good practices in terms of integration and immigration. In the year 2013, the Dominican Republic president realized that it was necessary to confront a debt that our country was facing in order to talk about the immigration topic. And precisely, they brought about 3 fundamental topics. The first one was based on a reorientation of our migration policy to complete what is considered the national normativity. The second had to do with the labor-related migration processes, and the third one had to deal with efficiency at the border. So, of course, the one that created the biggest uproar and the biggest expectation in the public was the execution of the national plan of regularization of foreigners. By a decree of 2013, the President of the Republic executed this plan. And the first thing that we did was the following. We talked with all of civil society that was interested in migration topics. Second, we talked with the international community, known organizations, with migration, all of the embassies that were accredited in the country. And why not also with the UNICEF, and present to them what we were trying to do with the regularization plan. We received their suggestions, we presented ours, and we initiated the process. The first inconvenience that we had was that a majority of immigrants that we had were from our neighboring country of Haiti. And we're not talking about regularization of the conditions of migration, but of the documentation. A country that
en más de un
and more
80%,
than 80%
no tenían
did
documentación
not
social.
have any
Y ese
national
era el mayor reto
documentation, and that was the
entonces que
biggest
nosotros
challenge
empezábamos a iniciar.
that we were trying to embark upon
Pues
at that
entonces
time.
eso le costó
So
al
then that
país
cost the country
$45 millones,
$47 million,
un país
a
pobre,
poor country
con
with
dificultades. Y el
difficulties,
proceso
and the
fue
process was
eminentemente
eminently
gratuito
free.
y estuvo
And
dirigido,
it
como le
was
decía el
directed,
ministro
as,
Mejía,
as Minister
a
Mejia told
todos
you,
los extranjeros que
towards
se encontraban
every
en el
foreigner that
país
was present in the country,
pernoctando de
but
forma irregular.
noting that were performing it in a regular way.
Tienen
You
conocimiento
have
de que
all
nuestro
known
país no tan
that our
solo es un
country
país de
is not
destino,
only
es un país
a
también de origen, un país
destination
de tránsito.
country, it's a transit, a
Más
heavily transited
de
country.
1.800.000
More than
dominicanos
1,800,000
pernoctan en el exterior.
Dominicans
Más de 5
live
millones
outside
100
of the
mil
DR. More than 5,100,000
extranjeros pasan
foreigners
por nuestro país en
pass through
calidad
our
de turistas.
country,
Y se cuestiona qué
and
cantidad
then we question how
de extranjeros
much
pernoctan en nuestro
of that
país.
amount of foreigners
Algunos dicen
are living in the
que son
country.
2
Some of them
millones,
say that
otros
some
dicen
say
que
that
es
it's 2,000,000,
1.500.000,
some say that
otros
it's
dicen que son
2,800,000,
800.000.
some people say
En
it's
mi pueblo, en San
800,000.
Juan de la
In my
Maguana,
country, in San
centrado
Juan de la
en la
Maguana,
región sur,
which is close to the southern
decimos que hay que
region, we
verlo con
say
ojo de buen cubero.
that we have to see it with
Quiere
a
decir que si
close eye,
en mi
which means
barrio,
that if in
cuando
my
me levanto
neighborhood,
veo
when I
muchos
wake up, I
extranjeros,
see a lot of
entonces yo digo
foreigners,
que hay 2 millones.
then I say that it's 2
Si
million.
veo que casi
If
no hay
I
muchos
say that there
extranjeros,
aren't
digo
that
que es
many
1 millón.
foreigners, then I'll just say 1
Y si
million.
no veo,
And if
digo
I
que hay
don't see any
600.000.
foreigners, then that must be
Entonces,
600,000.
¿cómo
So then
comenzamos
how do
un
we even
proceso
start a
cuando tú
process when you
científicamente
can
no tienes
scientifically
una estadística
have a
bien clara de qué
statistic
cantidad
that is
existe?
clear
Por
about how many
supuesto,
foreigners
si
are in
hay
the country?
condición migratoria
So of course, if
irregular,
there's an
tú no
irregular
puedes saber qué
migratory
cantidad
condition,
hay,
then
es
you will never
imposible.
know. It's
Pero tiene
impossible
que
to know.
tener por lo
But you want to
menos
have at
un
least
levantamiento
some
de qué
step
cantidad
ahead
de
of
extranjeros
how
pernoctan
many
en el
foreigners
país.
at least
Bueno,
are
cuando
present in the
tomamos la
country. So
encuesta
when we
del
took
2012
on the survey
y
of
comenzamos a
2012
trabajar,
and
permítanme
started to work,
decirle
let me just tell you
que
that
durante todo el proceso
during the entire
participaron
process,
288.000
288,000
extranjeros.
foreigners
Nosotros no habíamos
participated.
tenido la
We
primera
hadn't even
experiencia de un
had the
proceso de
first experience
regularización de
of
extranjeros.
regularization of foreigners
Y en
in
un
the country,
año
and in 1 year,
inscribimos
we
288.000
inscribed
y lo más
288,000, and the
importante,
most important
obtuvieron
part, they
documentación
obtained
más de
documentation. More than
259.600.
250,000 of them received
Nunca en
documentation.
América Latina se había
Never
hecho un
in
proceso
Latin
y en el
America
mundo tal
or in the
vez
world
en
maybe,
proporción
and had
de
there been a
regularización
process of
con
regularization
esta
in this
calidad y
proportion,
con esta
of this
cantidad.
quality and of this quantity.
Bueno,
Well,
hicimos el proceso
we
de
did that process of regularization,
pero vino una
but there
crítica
was
desde el
a
exterior muy grande.
external
¿Qué
critique
van a
that was really
hacer
big. What are you going to
con,
do
con las
with
personas
the
nacidas en
folks that
República
are
Dominicana,
born in the DR,
hijas de padres
that are
extranjeros con
that are
condición
like
migratoria
that are the
irregular?
sons of foreign
¿Qué
parents that have an
pasaría? Ahí
irregular
comienza la
immigration story?
comunidad internacional
And
a
that's when the
decir
international
que
community
había
started
un
to say
proceso de
that there was a process of
desnacionalización. Bueno,
denationalizing folks.
el presidente de la
Well,
República
even the
hizo una
president
segunda
of the Dominican
consulta
Republic made a second
y sometió un
consultation
proyecto de
and
ley al
submitted
Congreso,
a law
porque este no era
project to
un
the
tema de
Congress, because this
gobierno, era un
wasn't
tema de Estado,
this was a state concern,
fundamentalmente.
fundamentally, not a
Y
government
se
concern.
aprobó la ley
So they approved
169-14 y determinó
law
lo siguiente, que le puso
169.14 that
fin
determined the
jurídicamente y
following, which
prácticamente al tema.
ended this
Primero,
topic.
que todos
Firstly,
aquellos nacidos en
all of
República
those
Dominicana,
born in Dominican
hijos de padres
Republic,
con
which
condición
were
migratoria
the
irregular,
offspring of parents of
no son
irregular
dominicanos,
immigration,
sin embargo tienen
are
su
not
residencia
Dominicans,
permanente.
but do have permanent
Primero.
residency. That was the first
Segundo,
thing. The
que
second
todos aquellos
was that
aquellos
those
nacidos en
Dominicans
República
born in
República
Dominican
Dominicana,
Republic,
hijos de padres extranjeros
parents who were the offspring of foreign
con
parents
condición migratoria
with
irregular,
an irregular migratory
pero
condition,
inscritos en los
but that were
libros,
inscribed
en el libro civil,
in the civil books,
erróneamente son dominicanos.
are Dominican by mistake.
Porque esas
Because
personas
those
no
people
tenían la culpa
were
de
not
que
to
un oficial
blame
civil
that then a
lo
civil
haya
official
inscrito,
had
¿verdad?
inscribed them irregularly
Porque
in
lo
the
que
book.
procedía en ese
Because what
momento
would
era
happen
que
back
lo
in the day was
inscribiera
that they
en
would
el
get
registro de extranjeros.
written into the national registry, but they were
Entonces,
supposed to be written into the
en esa
foreigner registry.
condición eran
But in that
55.000
condition,
personas.
there was about
Y esas
55,000
55.000
people, and
personas
of those
han
55,000
estado
people,
pasando por la
there
Junta
have
Central
been going
verificando
through
su nombre y
the central
conservan
electorate,
su
and they
condición de dominicano.
continue
Por
to
supuesto,
preserve their
esos
status as Dominican.
55.000
Of
no
course,
van a
those
aparecer muchos.
55,000 are
Hay
not going
muchas
to be that many.
personas que viven en
Some
otro
of them live
país,
in other
otros
countries,
murieron,
some of
etcétera,
them
etcétera.
died, etc.
Pero eso resolvió el problema que se había
But that
presentado.
resolved a lot of the problems
Ya
that were
aquellas personas
presented.
que habían dicho que todo era un
Those folks that said
proceso,
that was a
que era un
process and
proceso que era
it was a
mentira, bueno, pues
lie,
después
well
al
then
final
at the end
la
of
OEA
that,
y todos los
the
organismos
UVA and other
internacionales han
national organizations have
reconocido que es
recognized
un elemento de
that
buena
it
práctica
was a
en
good
todo el
practice
mundo.
process around
Yo
that
no
can be
quisiera
recognized around the
terminar mi
world. I don't want to
intervención
end my intervention
sin que antes
without
le dé un
first
pequeño
giving
toquecito
a little
al
touch to the
tema de
topic of
integración
integration
y migración per
and
se.
immigration itself.
¿Cómo se integra
How do you
un
integrate
inmigrante
an
a la
immigrant to
cultura,
the
a la
culture,
educación,
to the
a la
education,
salud,
to the
a la
health, to
economía
the economy
de una
of
ciudad,
a city,
de una población
of a
del cual es nuestro
population
origen?
of where they're
Es
not
una
from?
cuestión
That is a very
complicada y
complicated
más
thing,
cuando, repito,
and even more
es
so
una
when, and I
migración
repeat,
irregular. Es
it's
una
an,
cuestión
it's an, it's an
complicada.
irregular
Sin
process.
embargo, le voy a
It's a
dar
complicated
tres datos
process, and I
para
want to give you
terminar.
3 details
Más
to end this.
de
More than
52.000
52,000
estudiantes preuniversitarios y universitarios,
pre-college students and college
principalmente de
students,
nacionalidad haitiana,
mainly from
están
Haitian
en las
origin,
universidades y
are
escuelas
in
públicas.
our
Escuelas
universities and
absolutamente
colleges,
gratuitas.
completely
Y en
free
la universidad
schools.
también,
And
en los
also in
últimos
college,
años,
in the last few
en la
years,
Universidad Autónoma de Santo
in
Domingo
the Autonomous
también.
University of Santo Domingo, then we
Pero
also have a
además,
big number of Haitian students.
más de un
But more than
16% en varias localidades y
16%
en
in
otras
various
casi un
locations,
80%
and in others
del
more than
presupuesto
80%
destinado a la
of the
salud
budget that is destined to health
va dirigida a los
goes
nacionales
straight
haitianos.
to Haitian
El
nationals.
gobierno dominicano emitió una resolución mediante la cual
The Dominican government emitted
había
a
que inscribir
resolution
en
in
todas
which
las escuelas y
in
había
all
que
schools
recibir en sus
had to be
hospitales
inscribed and had to
públicos
be present
a
in the
todos aquellos
public
extranjeros
hospitals.
sin
They had
importar
to receive
que
any
tengan o no
foreigners
tengan algún tipo
without
de
asking
documentación.
if they had any documentation or
Si
not.
ustedes pueden notar,
So if you can see,
este ha sido un
this has
ejemplo
been an example
de integración
of
y de buena
integration
práctica
and good practice
ante una situación como la que se presenta en la
amidst a
actualidad a
situation
nivel
like the
migratorio
one that we
y
have
el
on
gran problema
immigration
que
level
tenemos con
and
la
the big
migración
problem we
irregular.
have with
Yo
irregular
quisiera
immigration.
ya con las
I
preguntas
want
que
to,
ustedes puedan hacer, poder seguir conversando
be able
sobre
to
el
keep
tema.
talking
Muchísimas
about this
gracias.
topic with any questions you may have later on. Thank you so much. So in terms of the integration topic, we think about economic exchanges and commercial exchanges. Even though we know that some of the exchanges that happen in the region in terms of cultural and artistic exchanges, sports, institutional, and we also know that there's a multiplicity of contexts that are personal and familiar, but in the area of commerce and economy, Professor Golub, can you talk to us about what is the hot topic in terms of commerce and economy in the Caribbean? Thank you, everyone, Hector, for this opportunity. Thank you. I'm very proud. It's a great honor to be with all of you today, ministers, and with all of you here in the room. I also want to recognize my students who are here to also, they inspire me every day to learn more about this hemisphere. Well, I'm going to give you a more global context because we are in the globalization era, but also we are in this moment where we are facing a lot of uncertainty in terms of the regime of institutions, in terms of international commerce. And I also want to focus on the uncertainty that has happened with NAFTA that is also, well, in English, someone in the Boston Journal had called it USMCA,
USMCA, el nuevo, pues,
USMCA, you know,
nueva
the
iteración
new
del
iteration of
NAFTA.
the NAFTA deal.
Estamos
Is what I
hablando
mean.
del cambio
So we're
de
talking about the
en términos,
change in terms
digamos,
of both
ideológicos y también
ideological
prácticos
and
de
practical
la política comercial de Estados
policies,
Unidos
commercial
en
policies of the
cuanto
United States
a
in terms of
sus
its
vecinos y
neighbors,
también
neighboring
en
countries,
términos
and also in
del
terms
mundo.
of the
Esta
world.
es una
This is an
administración
administration
transaccional.
that is
Es
transactional,
que no está
and it's
adversa
that, you know,
a negociar, pero lo
they're
que quiere
open
es
to
negociar,
negotiating, but what they want to
renegociar
negotiate is
tratados que ya están
renegotiate treaties that
firmados
are already
y
formed,
también quiere
and wants to
negociarlos
also
en
negotiate
términos
them in
bilaterales.
very
Esta gente tiene un
bilateral
poco de
terms.
alergia al
They seem to
multilateralismo.
be
Piensa que
allergic to
Estados Unidos,
multilateralism. They think, you
pienso
know,
que tienen razón,
I think they're right. I
que
think that
tienen más
they
ventaja
have more
Estados
of an
Unidos
advantage in the
negociar
United
en un
States to
ambiente
negotiate in
bilateral.
a
Y eso es
bilateral
una cosa que
environment.
sabe muy
And
bien
that
América Latina,
is
siempre
something
pues
that
muchos países
Latin
de América
America
Latina,
knows. A lot of
diría
Latin American
República
countries,
Dominicana,
and
México, que
including
nos
DR and
conocen
Mexico,
aún
which
más.
is
Incluso
knows us even
Canadá
more. Even
son
Canada are
campeones
champions
del
of
sistema
the
multilateral, ambos
multilateral
en términos
system in
políticos en
terms
las
of
Naciones
politics,
Unidas,
in terms of the United
igual
Nations as
que
well,
en
and
la
also
Organización Mundial de
in the
Comercio. Porque
globalization
los
of
países de
global
esta
commerce.
región
Because the
saben muy
countries in
bien
this region know
la
very well
estrategia de dividir y conquistar.
they need
¿No?
to,
Es
you know, they
mucho
know the
más
divide and conquer strategy.
fácil
It's very much
negociar y
easier to
tener la
negotiate
ventaja
and have the upper
cuando
hand
es usted
when
el
you
más
are
grande
the bigger
en la pareja,
one
¿no?
in
Así que
the
eso con
negotiation.
Trump,
So Trump,
por su electorado, también
or in
estamos
his
hablando de
electorate,
un
we're talking
presidente
about a
que
president
quiere
that
cumplir con sus
wants
promesas a
to,
su electorado.
you know, fulfill his
Quiere
promises to his electorate,
renegociar
wants to
tratados.
renegotiate treaties in
Entonces
this
ese
way.
problema, además de
So
ser
this is a problem that
transaccional
instead
y
of just being
bilateralista,
transactional and bilateralist,
también pues
it's
esto
also,
la forma
you know, the form in which
de negociar
they
es,
negotiated,
están intentando
you know, they're
hacer
trying
un
to
tipo de rueda
create
que
some
está
sort of
Estados
wheel
Unidos en medio
where
y
the
que
U.S. is in
tienen
the
todos los
middle,
demás
and then they
allí.
have all of the other ones giving
Y ese es un
him,
gran
giving them
problema
some, and that's a big
porque también
problem
estamos en
because
un momento, ese es un
we're
cambio,
also,
¿no?
you know, that's a
Porque
big
no es un
change,
cambio
and it's not a change of
otros gobiernos
other
que
governments that
no buscara la
won't,
ventaja
you
de
know,
Estados
won't
Unidos.
want to get the
Pero
U.S.,
en la
don't have the
época de
U.S. in
NAFTA,
mind.
cuando se
But in the
firmó en los
time of
años
NAFTA, when
90,
NAFTA was signed in the
estaban también
90s,
hablando de
they were
un
also talking
área
about an
de libre
area
comercio
of
en
free
las
commerce
Américas,
in the
pero ese
Americas,
proyecto
but that
también
project
tenía a
also
Estados Unidos
had
en
United
medio,
States in
¿no?
the middle
Así
of
que en
it.
este momento
So
tenemos la
in this moment, we
incertidumbre
have this
también en la
uncertainty
Organización Mundial de
of also
Comercio,
in the
porque la administración
Organization
de
of
Trump
World
también
Commerce,
no
because in
quiere
Trump's administration, they
renovar
don't want to renew
los
the
mecanismos
mechanisms of
de las disputas,
the
que es un gran
disputes,
problema,
which
que
is a
son
problem.
paneles
You know,
que
these are
resuelvan
panels that
las disputas.
resolve
Así que
disputes,
pues
and
el
you know, the
multilateralismo comercial
multilateralism,
estamos en un momento
commercial
de incertidumbre.
multilateralism is facing on a
Entonces
certain period of
hablamos
time.
de
So now
este
we also
hemisferio.
talk about this
Tenemos,
hemisphere. We
tenemos a
have
Canadá y México que ya
Canada
tienen
and
otro
Mexico that already
acuerdo,
have other
pero
agreements,
todavía
but to
están
still
imponiendo los
are
aranceles en
imposing
contra
aranceles against
acero, ¿no? Así que tienen
steel.
todavía problemas
So
con
there are
Estados
still
Unidos.
problems with the U.S.
Tenemos
in that front.
Mercosur
We have
en
Mercosur
Sudamérica,
in South
pero
America,
Mercosur también
but
tiene sus
Mercosur
problemas.
also has
Tenemos
its
el
own
problema de
problems. We
Venezuela
have
en
the
este momento.
Venezuelan problem at this moment.
Hemisferio
So this
es posible
hemisphere
poner,
is,
pues,
you know,
mirar con un poco de
you have to look at it
pesimismo,
with some
pero
pessimism
desde
maybe.
mi punto de
But
vista
from my
también
point
es
of
un
view,
momento de
it's also a
oportunidad.
moment of
Porque
opportunity
hay una gran historia
because there's a great
en este
history
hemisferio
in this
de
hemisphere
buscar la
of
unidad.
finding unity.
Siempre con, pues,
Always,
un
you know,
tema que
it's a topic that comes back to
vuelve y
us and
vuelve.
comes back and comes
Yo
back.
creo que en este
But I think
momento,
in this
aunque
moment,
veamos
even if we
en
look
la Unión
at
Europea
in the
problemas
European
de
Union
integración,
problems
porque
of
tenemos el
integration,
Brexit
you know, we
y
have Brexit
rechaza
happening and you know, rejecting that idea of
yo creo que
economic
este
integration.
hemisferio
I think in
tenemos
this
una gran
hemisphere we
oportunidad.
have a great opportunity
Porque
because
posibilidad
the possibility
de
of
avanzar en regiones ya lo
advancing
hemos
in
visto
regions, we've seen it
con
already
el área de
with
Asia.
the
No, es
area of
que la
Asia.
administración Trump
Like
se
the Trump
ha
administration
apartado
has
del
separated
Tratado del
from the
Pacífico, pero
Pacific
los
Treaty,
otros países
but
han
other
avanzado
countries
con el
have
tratado,
advanced
les
with
han
the
dicho, pues
treaty,
ya,
and they
que
say,
usted
yeah,
no viene con nosotros, ya
if you don't
veremos,
want with us,
ya
that's
vamos a
fine. We
cenar,
can do our own
¿no?
thing,
Que
right?
vamos a actuar
So
con
we're
esto.
going to continue with
Entonces
that.
estoy
And then
pensando
I'm
en este
also
momento
thinking in
del
this
Frente
moment
Unido
about the
en
United
contra
Front
de no solamente
against not
contra Estados Unidos,
only
pero también más
the United States,
positivamente,
but also more
como decía,
positively,
pues,
like
el ministro,
like
de
the minister
buscar
was saying, in order to
soluciones
look
a
for
problemas
solutions
los
to
problemas
problems that we
comunes
have in common
y
in terms of the
también
environment as well.
pensar pensar en
and
lo
also
que
thinking about
sería
what it would be to defy and national interests, international interests. So we talk about in terms of the zero sum theory, right? Of thinking that relations with countries, because they have international interests, it's a competition, and that also is seen in the strategy, in the national security strategies that Trump administration has presented that sees this environment, the international environment, as a chess game of some sort, as a game where one loses and one wins, right? That's the zero sum theory that I'm talking about and how the Trump administration has presented it. But as we've seen in the OBC and other environments, there can be multiple wins, multiple winners. So that is also a challenge because globalization hasn't affected all countries in the same way and hasn't affected all the populations of those countries in the same way either. So then we have movements that are very strong within countries that see commercial exchange with, very negative terms, where they see that they're losing, that they want the protection of their governments. So we see this Brazilian rhetoric, where we see this rhetoric in other countries of also saying that there are nationalist movements. So that's the challenge. We have common problems, but then personal interests divide us, and that's the problem. I think leadership, as we've seen in DR, in Dominican Republic, and other countries of this hemisphere, is very, very important because supremacy in this hemisphere has always been sacred in a way because of the threat of the United States. But what we've seen in terms of the European Union is that it's also possible, and I'm going to say this in English, es posible escalar hacia arriba. If we're talking about cooperating, we can then confront the challenges of globalization. The big problem with the uncertainty in the United States is that a lot of countries in America Latina are looking for markets. And the United States is one of the nearest markets and most safest markets. But right now, it's not that safe. You have to look for other markets. And right now, thinking of Europe, Asia, but also there's markets within the hemisphere. There's markets in countries of the hemisphere, and that's really important to innovate in this, and also negotiate and think about what's happening with other superpowers that are also active here in this hemisphere. Not only the United States that will always have its interests, but we also have China. We have China, which is also looking for hegemony in their own region, but it's also looking for the natural resources of Latin America. How do you negotiate with China when China is extending these loans? That even that's its own way of acting. They have loans to give out, and the initiative, the Belt Initiative, and it's also a type of circle with China in the middle. So that's sort of like the same as the U.S., a strategy that a lot of the superpowers are trying to do. So that's a big problem of China, maybe, and also thinking about the Russian interests is also a part of it. So I'm gonna end here, and I also want to invite you to think about, or maybe comment more with all of you, what would be the projects, what would be the common problems and the common opportunities for those in America Latina and Latin America to maybe finally, what you call an idea that has arrived in this time, that it's going to be that moment of opportunity of saying, what can we do, what's happening with the United States, and how do we take advantage of the power of integration that is present? Thank you for your attention. So when you go back home, I know that you're going to be anxious to maybe open the book to see in its totality. You're going to see that a lot of the topics that have been touched upon in an expert manner and in the complexity and maybe in a superficial way, they are going to be, discussed in a deeper way in this book. What you have seen today has simply been a little taste of what the material, not only theoretical but also statistical, that is present in all the presentations that have been made today. I know time is not on our side right now, and I agree with Professor Golub with other comments that our region, with its diversity and its complexities and its problems, also as a magnet has always looked for the ways to integrate. Maybe we are blessed up to a certain point that a lot of the disputes in our countries have been executed in the baseball fields or in the football field and not in the battleground. And we want to hope that in the future, given the tensions that exist in the region, with the leadership of people like Minister Mejia and others, we can really find the way to have an open dialogue, a more deeper dialogue, and to find our common problems. I'm going to take the chance to open for 30 seconds or 1 minute if there's any person that has a question that is burning and the question is screaming inside of you so much because we have no much time that if you don't do it right now you have our undivided attention, and if you don't do it now you can't sleep. So let's give a question of 1 or 2 questions and we can give the panelists a chance to give us a minute, and then we can close the event with kindly the young person right behind you right here and the gentleman over here. 2 questions and we're done. Can you please stand up? Hola. My name is Aline, and my question is, before anything, I wanted to thank you all the panelists for this fantastic panel. I am not a student in the university, but I was interested in someone with a friend that recommended for me. Works in the UN, and I'm happy that I came. I also wanted to say that I'm very moved to hear solidarity that you have with the Haitian people, your great preoccupation for the environment, and immigration, and irregular immigration, and also to hear Professor Golub about China's role in this. So I'm a Chinese citizen, and I've been in Latin America for 5 years, and and also in Dominican Republic, and I wanted to ask if other panelists have a Latin American lens of how they see the role of my country in your region. If you see it as a hegemony that wants to lend as a trap, or if you see it as a more benevolent role. So yeah, let's take 1 more question and get the panelists. And I want to tell you that the ministry is going to have an answer to the question that she just asked about relationships between the Dominican Republic. If you can please come to the mic. Good evening, my name is Jose Padilla. I'd like to ask the Dr. Golub if the United States has forgotten about its country, or it's about Latin America, and if this would be the precise moment to give us more opportunity to integrate and more importance in integration to the region. Have you noticed that the most important regions do you think this is the right time to pay attention to how important the region is in terms of integration?
Caballero, deleítanos con la última pregunta de la tarde. Inglés, por favor. Usted dispara como usted entiende. Yo voy a tratar de traducir al español. O traductor, si usted quiere, puede tener acceso a la traducción completa, nada más que lo que está escuchando por aquí.
No, yo puedo hacerlo, pero sí. Yeah.
What are the stresses on the development of a democracy in the Dominican Republic because of all these integrations and relationships with other countries? There are sometimes win-win, sometimes win-lose. We see a lot of that, obviously, in the United States.
Talking about internal stressors.
Internal stresses brought on by this integration.
¿Cuáles son los tipos de estreses internos que ocurren dado al proceso de integración con inmigración irregular y con la interacción con otros países? So let's give a chance to each of the panelists and some of the ministers to respond the best way that they can, and to also finish with a precise commentary if you want. So I want to start answering the question of that young woman. I've been a follower of Jose Marti, Jose de Cuba, who says that I want to, answer to the voice of the youth in responding to your question about the role of China And it's, it's an emerging economy, not so much emerging, it's very mature at this point. And above all, with everything that has to do with its expansion, economic expansion. And in terms of environmental topics, paradoxically, a country that depended on a 70% of carbon and fossil fuels is actually now doing the most powerful energy revolution in the framework of what is globalization. And that is a possible reality. In economic terms, Latin America and the Caribbean is interested in is a topic of interest for China and hegemonic countries in terms of the resources that those superpowers need, that the country needs. Of course, America Latina and the Caribbean were not on the hegemonic maps. It still isn't really. And I can dare say that if Latin America doesn't coordinate itself, then it will have to accept the rules that China and the U.S. implements. And I feel like, as Hector has said, in the unity of the diversity that we have in Latin America and the Caribbean, and in this intrinsic strength, that's where our position lies when facing China and the United States. I think there's two fundamental aspects that we had to confront at an internal level. The first one was a very reduced group that defended strongly the topic of nationalism, a very complex topic. And the second tension was also another small group that was denominated, quote unquote, pro-defenders of Asian nationals. So maybe that was the biggest thing, was the biggest difficulty, because we had to go throughout the entire country. We had to walk and explain where we were headed, listen to the population, and then, we were starting to develop a strategy of what we wanted to really do. And that was one of the biggest challenges. And, it had to fundamentally deal with us being a poor country. So then there was an international community, but that also transferred to the Dominican Republic, that understood that Dominican Republic had to carry with a problem, but to contend with a problem that wasn't a problem of a Dominican Republic's problem. It just was a problem that was on an international level very much our own. And that was one of the biggest obstacles that we had, tensions that we had during the whole process. But thank you to all the integration of the population itself, we were able to resolve it on some levels. And it's not that it's completely gone, but now there is a lesser proportion of that problem exists at this moment. Thank you. The question about intentions of China, it's possible that they are, depends on the perspective, right, of the benefits, right? Because exchange with a powerful country, the symmetry has benefits, but it also has a double-edged sword when you're having negotiations with a powerful country and continent. And in Latin America, it's interested that, they have their own interests as Latin American countries in being in that relationship, but, to take advantage of the benefits of the exchange, of the commercial exchange, of the investment, because China does have a lot of resources, and the Chinese government also is looking for an image, to develop an image in the world, to develop a presence, and also a type of profile in the world. But there are also problems, how do you do this, but also understand the terms of the exchange in order to reduce dependence, because it would be a big mistake and also a loss of an opportunity of exchanging one type of dependency for another type of dependency. And it's not just to say that it's inevitable, and I'm also saying that, following all the topic right here, it's talking about political will. Is there a political will from the governments of these countries to really try to negotiate rules or treaties, and to do it from a a strong position. And I'm sorry that my intervention is getting extended, but for the other question, sometimes the problems of stressors is United States made. When the United States is putting attention on America Latina, they're intervening, right? And yeah, from my point of view, I feel like, it is a time for my government or the government of my country recognize the value of this hemisphere and that continent of Latin America and the Caribbean. But also be careful of what it wants, because maybe it receives it, and it also creates another tension where the U.S. thinks that they can manipulate certain things or bring about tensions in domestic policies, and that might be a bigger problem with inter-American relations. So you're saying that there might be a bigger problem in the United States not paying attention. The problem would be that they're just intervening, right? And I just wanted to clarify that point. Minister, if you have any other comments for the panel? Well, before closing comments, I wanted to thank the space and all the folks that spoke here from Dominican Republic that have been here with us. Roberto Jerónimo, who's here, Jerónimo Cho, to Frederick Martinez, emblematic figure of the Dominican Republic, Santiago Pito Acevedo, who's here also from the Republic of Bonao, and Manuel Ruiz from Telemiclo. Survivor, thank you for that your health has improved, brother. I think that what guarantees peace in the world is invoking the thoughts of Benito Juárez in terms of peace. The respect to individual right is peace. Each nation that within a supremacy framework takes decisions, even if they're wrong, is a right that is given to that nation, that belongs to that nation. If another nation tries to intervene in those matters, that politically has a name and it's called injustice. And when that occurs, then we have conflicts, because there isn't respect to individual rights. In the case of us, the Dominican Republic, we are an independent country ever since 1984, and we have a pedestal of these three men that give us freedom: Juan Pablo Duarte, Francisco Rosero Sanchez, and Ramon Matia Mejas. And we control ourselves as a country that is also developing by in a way that we synthesize this by a constitution we call Carta Magna, or the will of the Republic. If we act according to the Carta Magna, to that constitution, our country does not ask for, they ask us to provide explanation. Our laws require explanation. We try to act within the rules of that constitution, our constitution, not another one. And the topic of China, we did it within a framework of being an independent country. That is a decision that a president had the right to make without consulting any statement of the Dominican state, because our constitution gives unilateral powers to the president to take that step. And that's what he did. So then it was within the framework of the rights. But I wanted to say, for those of you who know me, they know my sympathy for historical reasons with China. But I also have to say that decision was made not inspired in the martyrdom of the or the thought of Platón. We took the decision in terms of our needs and our convenience. A market of 1,300 million inhabitants
En un momento que los viejos
in a
esquemas se han caído, se han roto, se
that
han
has
desplomado,
seen certain things vanish
tenemos
and
nosotros
break,
que hacer, como dicen los
as
dominicanos,
Dominicans
del
say,
Cibao,
of the
hacer de
Cibao,
tripa
we had
corazón
to make
para
something out of
sobrevivir
nothing to
en
survive
medio del
in the
fracaso del
middle of
modelo económico,
failure of the economic model that we had,
porque tenemos una responsabilidad
because we have a
como ciudadanos.
responsibility to our citizens.
Y es de ahí que nuestro
And it's
gobierno
from there that
comenzó
our
a
government started to
diversificar
diversify
su política exterior
its internal
para accesar al nuevo
policies
mercado
to
que
access
para
a new
nosotros era un
market
mercado virgen.
that for us was a virgin
Y
market.
para que ese mercado
And for
pudiera
that
accesar
market
a la República
could access
Dominicana.
Dominican
Entre ellos está
Republic.
China,
And within them is
está
China,
Vietnam,
there's Vietnam,
y están otros
and there's
países.
other countries as well.
Cuando yo fui la primera
When
vez
I
con una
went there
misión
for the
oficial
first
a
time on an
Vietnam,
official mission to Vietnam,
me encontré que el
I
embajador
found that the
de los
embassy
Estados Unidos de Norteamérica
of the United States of
era un
America
piloto
was
de
a
guerra,
fighter
preso
pilot of
allá
a
en la
war
guerra.
that had been
Era
a
el
prisoner of
embajador
war. He
norteamericano.
was the embassy
Por lo que estaba
North
claro
American
que no había un resentimiento histórico
representative. So there wasn't
por lo
a
pasado,
historical
sino
resentment for the
una
past,
necesidad de
but
convergencia
a
mutua
need of mutual convenience.
y que se ponía de
And
manifiesto
that
tanto los
was being
vietnamitas como los
manifested with the
norteamericanos en una
Vietnam
política
folks
de
and North
armonía
Americans in the
en
policy of
sintonía con los
harmony,
signos del nuevo tiempo.
in tune with the needs
Por
of the
tanto,
current time and the current
nosotros lo que hemos
climate.
hecho con
So
China
what we have
no
done
es la necesidad y la
with China
conveniencia,
has been about need
por la
and
importancia de su
convenience,
mercado
but the
y
importance
por el
of their
desarrollo que
market
han tenido ellos,
and for the development
pero
that they've
siempre en
had,
un marco de soberanía.
but always within a
Plena
framework of being an
República
independent country as the Dominican Republic.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Ya le agradeció a los periodistas.
And I've taken
Se me
thanks.
queda también mencionar
And
aquí
I also wanted to mention
a una persona
one person
que
here
nosotros lo hemos
that
integrado,
we have integrated here
que es norteamericano,
that is North American.
un científico,
He's a
uno de los tres
scientist,
mejores
one of the
urólogos
three
del
best
mundo,
urologists in the world,
inventores de la operación
and he invented the
robótica, es urólogo,
robotic
jefe de urología del
surgeon,
Mayo Hospital de aquí de Estados Unidos.
urology
Y
head of hospital here in the United States, and he introduced robotic operation here in the Dominican Republic. It was a great
y en el
labor
conocimiento de eso, la
in society,
asesoría que
and
tengo
we want to
desinteresadamente con el
recognize
presidente.
this type of training that has been given by, our president has given Dominican nationality to the Dr. Benson, who replaced it. So in terms of in the middle of the community, we want to welcome him to our nationality and to help us, for him to keep contributing not only to us Dominican people, but to humanity with the knowledge and, the effort that you've put towards the service of humanity that you provide. Thank you so much for accepting our nationality, Doctor. I also want to recognize. Go ahead.
It's a great honor to be here. My name is Dr. David Samadi. As you heard, I'm a urologist, and I'm also one of the pioneers in robotic surgery. It's a very interesting time for me to be here among you because I'm 52 years old, and I've been in America for about 37 years. And probably Minister Mejia may or may not know this story, but I came to America when I was 15 years old with my younger brother who was 12. And we had a very, very comfortable life back at home in Iran as Persian Jews. I grew up in a Muslim country, and I went to all-boys Catholic school, Don Bosco in Iran. So I had a very interesting upbringing. But life changed, and revolution happened, and we had to leave everything behind. And it's a story of immigrant, and I'm so happy to hear about the immigration and bringing this global view, listening to everyone here. I came here about 37 years ago, and with $300 in our pocket. It's a long story, but I can tell you that this country has been tremendous to my family, hard work, and all the doors were open. And today, I'm in a position to save lives. I can tell you that as a result of friendship, such as Minister Mejia and a lot of the Dominicans, I think this culture is very similar to mine. They're warm, open heart, friendly. If you're in for life. And as a result of this, I met so many wonderful people, Ambassador Carlos Castillo, and the names goes on forever, and including the president, who really welcomed me to the country. We have a tremendous opportunity here, and I think America is going through a lot of changes. I just heard one of my patients who was in my office, a Mexican, illegal Mexican patient who had some urologic issue. And I like these stories. The urology part of it is easy, but I heard about how did you get here? And he said he went through the border 3 times. He got arrested and he spent 2 months in jail. He was so happy to be here and work in this country. It's not as easy as it used to be when I came to this country. Putting politics aside, right or left, we're not going to get into this, but I think this is a tremendous opportunity for Dominican Republic. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of Somalis out there who may or may not be able to come to this country, and I think we should try to open the door. We should perhaps change some of the regulations, make it safe, but open the door to a lot of physicians, scientists, businessmen, really bring them to Dominican Republic. And certainly, as a new member of the country, if there's anything I can do, I will do everything I can to my power to make Dominican Republic successful. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Definitely, and it's something that integration has shown in the United States as well within different countries. It's not only a relationship at a national level, but it becomes a quotidian personal relationship. I was also trying to comment that I didn't want to let go of the fact that this is a country adopted to one of our nationals, the Maria de Hostos, with who they were mentioned. I'm part of our MFA, and we have a concentration in hemispheric studies. We're lucky to be in the city of New York, not because we can, intrude on anyone else's way of doing things in the world, but because historically we have been given representation, and one interest representation of all the countries in the North American region. So it's a certainly excellent space to learn. As we've done today, we want to welcome you we thank you for teaching us about your work and your experience. The city of New York has been enriched by the administration and even by the influence of countries like Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, who send quality of immigrants to the city of New York, even with Los Angeles, Miami, Houston, Chicago. New York has become every day a Latino city, a Latin American city, a Caribbean city. And Latinidad in New York has a very Boricua flavor and a Dominican flavor to it. And there's very many communities that meet at these crossroads. And these are some of these moments where we see those paths cross that we've been discussing tonight. It is a region with great diversity, as we said, but also with very many challenges. And I am very happy to sometimes, wake up and think or know what would have happened if Simón Bolívar and other liberators of Latin America, regional integration would be happening in the streets of Manhattan, in the streets of Queens, in the streets of Brooklyn, when citizens from the countries of those regions, in the quotidianness of their living, are getting together, talking and learning, share, and even marry and have kids, right, within the communities. Who would have thought that the 13% of Hispanics in the United States have parents that were born in 2 different countries? It's 2 countries. It doesn't matter countries that were born in the U.S., some parents are Dominican and other Puerto Rican, they were in the same country, but they're 2 nationalities, right? So we are part of that big experiment. Like my grandma used to say, juntos pero no revueltos, we're together but not messy together. And I think that's part of that mosaic. And I thank you, Minister, your efforts in terms of the region and the leadership of the Dominican Republic in trying to always maintain maintain that north of unity, comprehension, and dialogue. We want to thank you so much all for taking time to come, your valuable time to come here and be here with us. We are a public university of New York. We are your college. And thank you so much for being here, and please demand and ask more opportunities so that our institution can respond to the interests of your communities. This is your home. Thank you and good night.